re-strategizing, right? Understanding where our power lies and saying, look, I'd rather buy something from my neighbor, say Liberia, buy from Guinea, buy from Sierra Leone, buy from Ghana, buy from Nigeria, than convincing myself that I need that American product or I need that UK product, right? And I don't need it because it doesn't serve me. It continues to make me a slave to myself, a slave, right, to their currency, to their products.
All right, my people. So, as you all know, on the breakdown, we've been unpacking some of the most critical issues shaping our world today. But I don't just want you to hear from me, right? I want you to be able to hear from a range of perspectives. And so that's why I'm bringing you the breakdown panel, where each week I'll be joined by a dynamic group of voices to dig deeper into the hottest topics of the moment, challenging ideas, sharing insights, and keeping it real. Yes. So we're kicking it off today, and I am excited to introduce my panelists. Fanta and Nee, welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you, Sandra. How are you doing?
Good. How are you both doing?
I'm fine.
Thank you both so much. Now, for me right now, right, the state of our world feels like chaos. Okay, it's just a hot mess right now. Every day there's something new, and I feel like I can barely keep up, right? So I'm curious, what about you? How would you describe the state of our world today in just one word, and why? Nee, I'll start with you.
Yeah, Sandra, and state of our world in just a word. I said, I think is a landmine, right? And I did explain to you what I think a landmine means in this time and age, and that's because it's as if we are reckoning with the sort of world that existed after the Cold War until recently. So after the Cold War, it was proclaimed by American political scientists that this was the end of history. End of history meaning that there will be no other way to live than liberal democracy, than capitalism. No state can ever challenge Western hegemony. That sort of end of the world, like basically we come to the end of times. But wrong as they were, there are states that are rising, challenging American power. It's the Americans have found that it's actually very difficult to bully India these days. It's very difficult to bully South Africa these days. It's very difficult to bully Brazil.
Isn't South Africa being bullied right now with the tariffs and?
It is difficult to bully South Africa. I think for instance, the Americans would love the South Africans to sort of roll back on their pursuance of justice in favor of the Palestinians in the ICC. So that's actually one way in which South Africa is standing up for, let's say, global South solidarity as well as their national sovereignty. So the world has changed, and the end of the world, it is not. The end of history, it is not. We actually sort of reckoning with that. But then it also means that the people who were left behind as globalization expanded are now coming back to ask what is due them. Yeah. So
like who?
Oh, like the many who were left behind in the Western world, like the factories that went away from the US, that went to China because China probably provided cheaper labor. The left behind in the UK, when national public investments like National Health Service was sort of privatized for the private investors. All of these people have realized that the public goods have actually depleted and public services have actually gone down. And so they are wondering, and they've also seen that the powerful among them have gotten richer. They've seen it. And sadly, they are blaming their losses on things such as DEI. They are blaming their losses, things such as migration.
Yes.
They are blaming their losses on such things as affirmative action for women and all of that. So they are coming for their payback, and sadly, they are blaming what I feel, in my estimation, the wrong traditions and wrong institutions. And so it's a landmine because you need to be very careful where you step. You need to be very careful what you say. Things could blow up. Far right parties are actually winning across Europe, and we need to be mindful of the sort of politics and approach we adopt these days. So that's why it's a landmine. You need to just know where to step,
Interesting.
or else it just blows up.
Yeah, yeah. Fanta, what about you?
Oh man. The state of our world right now, I would say we're in a state of perversion where
Hmm.
um, I feel like we're in steep decline, morally, and all around. We live in a society in the world where pedophilia is celebrated, crimes against
Oof.
children goes unsolved, and the elites, the occult, are protected. Um, if that is not the beginning or the midst of a decline of a civilization, I don't know what else is. We see all around us, right? The normalization of bad behaviors. I think even beyond that, the normalization of genocide. Only, to wait 10 years from now, we'll be referring to it as the Palestinian Holocaust, as we refer to the Holocaust from decades ago.
Hmm. Hmm.
It's a world where we have to truly be able to look ourselves in the mirror and be able to identify who we are.
Hmm.
A world where demonic affiliations are celebrated, while the very mention of the one God, is frowned upon. A turn to faith for any type of comfort, and you're isolated. Um, that just
Hmm.
shows where we are, right? It's a battle. It's an active battle happening, with good versus evil, and I think we have to pick a side, right? We should not stay on the sideline. We should not stand on the sidelines and just whisper. I think we need to pick a side, because the battle is happening, whether we want to be activated or not. And if you're on this, you cannot worship God and worship something else. If you're on the side of evil, that's where you are. If you're on the side of good, that's where you are. And I choose
Hmm.
to be on the side of good. I choose to be a force for good. And I chose to fight every single demonic tendencies that come my way. So it's very sad, but our world is in a state of perversion, and it's
Hmm.
it's grotesque.
Woo, you both have made some really interesting points. And I just want to ask that what's happening in the world, right? As you've both described, what does it all mean for the global Black community? Where do we stand? Right. And when I say global Black community, I think we all know, right? Africa, from Africa to the Caribbean to the diaspora. What is this moment and what is happening, the shifts that are happening? What does it mean for us? Is it an opportunity? Is it a setback? I mean, how do you view that? Nee, we can start with you or whoever
Yeah,
wants to take that. Yeah.
yeah. So opportunities are ever present. It takes people who are looking for them to find them. And so for us as Africans or people of African descent or heritage, we have a unique story in the evolution of time, in the evolution of the world. We have a very unique story. I I get told by many, both in professional and private life, that well, some other people were also colonized, and they are moving on. And my pushback is, are they really moving on? Uh, and
Mm.
then, even if they were colonized as well, our colonization was unique. The relationship we have with the modern world, and by modern world, I mean this thing where nation states exist, and nation states have to compete with each other, and nation states have to go to war, and nation states have to cooperate. This world, we of African descent have a unique relationship with it, a very, very unique relationship with it. You can start from our relationship with Europe, before slavery or the transatlantic slave trade. But then, even if you started from that point, you get to a point where the borders that exist on our continent were not drawn by us. Black people who are found in the diaspora did not go there by consent. So we have a unique relationship with the modern world. Um, with regards to how we can navigate these times, I do believe in Pan Africanism. I am a big believer in the potential for a Pan African pushback, or a Pan African negotiation of our times. When I say a Pan African negotiation, I mean that when African countries come together, as instructed by Kwame Nkrumah, when he said that the independence of Ghana is meaningless unless it's linked with the total liberation of Africa. Prophetic words it is
Yeah.
proven to be, because individually set apart, African states will find it very difficult. In the same way, people who look like the three of us will find it very difficult to navigate a world where white resentment is actually the base for a certain kind of politics in the US as well as in Europe. Not just white resentment, but also a world where uh, people have been left behind by globalization and therefore believe that people who look like us are to blame for why they have been left behind. Forgetting that we've also been left behind. So
Yeah.
I just feel that there are opportunities, and the opportunity for me is in strengthening African integration as well as diasporan relations among Black people or people of African descent. Not just
Yeah.
people of African descent, but even those who wish as well. Really,
The
I don't mind.
allies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I am actually a very in terms of definition of Africa's friends, I actually have a very liberal notion that there are people who wish Africa well who are not Africans, and I
Absolutely.
invite them to the party as well.
They're needed. I think they're actually
Yeah,
needed
yeah,
in the
yeah.
party. Fanta, do you agree with that? Do you think that African unity is really the only way that we navigate these challenging times?
I think that's a very big component of it. I think I see more opportunity than disadvantages. Right?
Hmm.
We constantly engage in um, subjugating ourselves, right, to these systems that we know were not designed to empower us, as if um, once again, right, and this is probably going to be a recurring theme, as if not understanding if you were thrown in the jungle, right, you have your God-given abilities to survive, as the animals do. The birds
Yeah.
is every single day. It flies into the world, right, not knowing what it's going to face, but it comes back sustained. And I think we have moved away from that as a people. That's where our true power lies. It's in reestablishing those relationships with our faith, with our maker, to strengthen our sense of confidence, so we are empowered, right? We are enabled to stand up against those systems that serves to only oppress us. So I don't look at it as being a victim or a less of an opportunity. I wake up every day looking at it as how and what else can I do to stand up and continue to fight, because
Mm-hmm.
I am my own limitation, right? We are our own limitations. Yes, Africa being united is going to serve as a very powerful force. The Black community being united will absolutely do the same. But it has to start from the individual, right? Going back to, we have to
Mm.
wake up in the morning, look ourselves in the mirror and say, I can do this, right? I am with God. I'm a creation of God, right? I am not inferior to any other creation. Therefore, I have the same capabilities, I have the faculties, I have the intellectual capacity to navigate this world, to cultivate the world that I want. And we can say all along, right, that no, the systems are set up this way. And yes, they are. Humans will always do what humans do, always try to seek the advantage. So why would you
Hmm.
fault another human being for doing that, right? Cultivate your own advantages and leverage that
That's
as a
right.
point of
Yeah.
negotiation and a point of power. Do not be subjugated to their systems. You don't have to. And we find ourselves in this, like, doing this thing over and over again, right? Um, we often cast ourselves out before we're even casted out.
Hmm.
I hear many times in discussions where, oh, you shouldn't even attempt it, you're Black. And I look around and I said, what does that mean? Okay, what exactly does that mean? I'm African. What does that mean exactly? Does it takes away my capability to problem solve, to navigate, to negotiate, or to do what it is I am attempting to do? No. I think we really have to start there. We have to start with the individual, right? And then we build into this unifying body that can truly be a force to reckon with. You look at countries like Burkina Faso, right? They didn't wait for a united Africa to start making changes. You look at countries, Niger, right? They woke up and realized, look, we could be operating from a place because of all the natural resources that we have. Therefore, let's just start with that and let's start leveraging that to advantage instead of always operating from this place of subjugation. So I think it starts with us, and then the broader unity absolutely helps.
Thank you. So I want to switch gears a little bit and start diving into some of the hot topics, right, from this week. So I want to hear your perspectives on that. And one of the things that has certainly been a hot topic, I've been talking about it on the show, and it's made headlines as well, is Trump's deportation deals with African nations, right? Somehow, Africa has become the main battleground for Trump's third country deportation policy, which is essentially sending individuals whose home countries have refused them, right? No, we don't want you back. The U.S. is now sending them to another nation. And as of now, 4 African countries have all confirmed that they have reached some sort of a deal with the U.S. to accept migrants. South Sudan, Uganda, even Eswatini, which was surprising, and Rwanda. Now, the terms of these deals are very vague, so it is not really clear what these nations are receiving. However, we do know that they're not doing it for free, right? So what do you all think about these deals? Are there any benefits to Africa that we're not missing? Or, are these countries making a mistake? Who wants to start?
Yeah, I can start. Well, it's interesting, right? Because they're commoditizing. It's just another form of trade, right? They're taking humans, and which means that you channel a human being through a certain passage in exchange for cash. That's exactly what's happening. Let's call it that. And I think the African countries who are accepting these deals can make better deals. They have better alternatives than being engaged in human trafficking. There are bigger concerns around this, right, pertaining to the safety, the welfare, the well-being of their own people, right? If you're taking an example for some of these countries, I believe Eswatini was one of them, South Sudan is another, taking in hardcore criminals, right? It's one thing if you're taking in like migrants, right, exchanging for cash. Still bad, because you're exchanging for cash. If you're going to be a place for refuge to say, hey, I'm opening my doors to take in these people who are escaping hardship, right? Then great, we applaud you for that. But if you're taking in people in exchange for cash, is questionable, number one. Number two, if you're taking in hardcore criminals, you're exposing your society to a level of crime probably that they haven't been emboldened, right, to engage in or to practice. For example, you have countries that have never seen like armed robberies, right? They're probably seen like your normal theft here and there. And then you introduce hardcore criminals who are convicted armed robbers, and even worse than that. They start, of course, integrating with your population and teaching them the trade.
Yeah. So they claim that they are vetting these migrants and that they have reserved the right, to refuse migrants who have a criminal background. At least some of those countries are saying that, right?
Well, right, but I'm not sure for the ones because your deals are secret.
So is it okay if those migrants if they don't have a criminal background, is it still okay for them to do this?
I think
that's the question.
Yeah, I think it's questionable. Look, if you were just taking in and just being a safe haven for people who once again, right, are escaping like hardship, it's one thing. But if you're taking people in exchange for money, I don't see like the benefit there.
Right. So I have a different view, but not dramatically different. The reason for the difference I have with Fanta is because I see this as a reflection of a relationship between the global north and the global south, right? If one could cast their eyes to Asia, and there's a similar relationship between Australia and Indonesia. Indeed, this deal that the American government has with African countries is no different than the relationship the sort of deal that Americans arranged with El Salvador, right? So I look at this as a reflection of the relationship between the global north and the global south. That being said, I see global south countries um, acting in pursuance of their self-interest, and in pursuing your self-interest in a very cold and uncompromising world, you do certain things that would be found by most people as morally dubious, right? So I do agree with you that there are moral questions or question marks about the morality of taking these people, at least helping the Americans overcome a challenge of a certain kind. So there's that. But the truth of the matter is that these are
But it's
also
not a
very
challenge though, right? Like it's
it is a challenge. No,
not
it's a
really.
challenge. Yeah, it's a challenge because the area of um I'm one of those people who believes that politics arise out of morality, moral considerations. I subscribe to that particular viewpoint. But I also understand that survival, again, in a very cold, unforgiving global scene can really necessitate taking certain choices that you and I may find very, very troubling.
So where's
But
the
then
challenge, right?
the challenge for a country such as South Sudan is that they lack the the basis for they are not even close to self-sustaining, their population. They are not even close to being a state in the traditional sense of a territory with an authority that takes care of everyone, that protects everyone, that provides for everyone. They are not there yet. For a country like South Sudan, it is these choices that the world leaves them. It is these very, very unpalatable choices that the world leaves them. Their circumstances actually mean that they have to choose between a rock and a hard place. And so that is where, for me, we may need to start the analysis, right? Looking at it as a relationship, a reflection of the relationship between the North and the South, global North and the global South. So if you look at it as a reflection between the global North and the global South, you then ask yourself what tools, what options, what strategies are available to the people, to the nations of the global South. And when you do that, you realize that not a lot of options are available.
So what
It's,
resources does South Sudan currently have? Natural resources.
South Sudan is a country with very few mineral resources. But then again, the question isn't about what South Sudan can sell to take care of themselves right now. The
No, but
question
what do they
is
have though? Like can you list a few of like what they have?
South Sudan is a place that has a little bit of gold, they have a little bit of rare earth minerals, right? But that's also not it's also, I mean, the fact that they need to trade these in order to find sustenance again in a cold, unforgiving world, in a world where states are told that in order to procure the best possible life for your citizens, you need to compete with each other. You need to find the best talents wherever. You need to exclude certain people in defining a nation. These things are things that African states are actually coming to terms with. And so whenever we say, well, these people shouldn't have helped the Americans do these things, the question I think we do not go on to ask is, what are the options available to global South countries, countries whose relationship with the global North is forever determined by the whims of global capital, forever determined by the whims of not global North power, right? These are the countries that we are talking about.
Yeah, I
And
did.
obviously,
Guys, I am so sorry. I lost my internet connection, but I see you guys kept it going and I love it. Okay, what did I miss? It looks like I
no,
missed I
no, I
missed
was
a good
just
debate. Yes.
Yeah, so I
Go.
was just talking about the fact that whatever is playing out between the Americans and African states is a reflection of the relationship between the global North and the global South. And I cited the relationship between Australia and Indonesia, a global North country and a global South country that has a similar relationship as to what the Americans are instituting in Africa. And I mentioned El Salvador, a country in Latin America that also has a sort of arrangement, a similar arrangement with the American government. And so it is easy. I think most often than not, people sort of rely on national pride or nationalism in order to debate some of these things. It is difficult for us to look at a truly international or transnational issue. And the migration issue is an international issue, right? It's an international issue. And so to rely on nationalism and say, like, advise Uganda or South Sudan or Eswatini that you just have some dignity and not take them. I think it's actually
So
to sort of
what's your position on this? Because
my,
I
my
think
position my position is that in order to foster the sort of strength that we want to see in Uganda and you want to see in Eswatini and South Sudan,
yeah.
we need to have South-South solidarity, with solidarity among global South states that can repel this pressure. Because again,
Gotcha.
it's not just the Americans who are even asking for this. The Germans are proposing using the housing that was built in Rwanda. Remember that the UK Rwanda
Yeah. That was the
migration
deal. But
bill,
it didn't go
yeah,
that didn't go
fell
through,
through. Yeah,
right?
it
But they
fell
took the
through.
money.
Rwanda took the money, and the deal fell through. But the Germans are actually mooting the idea of using the hostels that were built. Like, we could
Oh.
still use it. So yeah, so this is actually a situation that requires global South countries to go beyond nationalism and national
Yeah.
pride,
So you're
and
saying
to
they're
actually
powerless. They don't have any choice on this matter unless
left
yeah.
alone, these states will do whatever it takes to survive in a cold, uncompromising world. Left alone, these states will suffer what they must as the stronger parties clash heads.
Gotcha.
They will suffer. And so if we do not actually have an internationalist approach to some of these things, you will, sorry to go on and on about this. The
Yeah,
EU,
this is
the
so
EU,
wrong. This is so wrong. As an African, I reject this. Right,
the EU.
my Chinese brothers will not agree with you on this. I'm sorry. I have to
Sorry,
interject. No, this is
just to make a point, the
Okay,
EU,
finish your point, Nia, and then we'll go to Fanta. Yeah.
yeah, the EU has an agreement with Morocco and Tunisia to keep them from to keep to they give Morocco and Tunisia money for these countries to keep hopeful from actually crossing the Mediterranean into Europe, right? And so that's the Tunisians and the Moroccans are basically like border guards, making sure that people from the Sahel and West Africa do not cross the Mediterranean. Now, this is what happens when the AU is not a sort of organization that can compel Tunisia and Morocco to do better, right? Tunisia and Morocco have elected individually to serve the interest of who pays the most to them,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And you realize that why is there a migrant crisis in the north of Africa? It's all started when Gaddafi's regime was collapsed. I'm no fan of Gaddafi. colonies. But the point of the matter is that there was a state
Yeah, make it.
that
Yeah,
exists.
Lee, try to wrap up so we can go to Fanta,
Yeah,
and then I want to move on to other topics.
yeah, there was a state that existed that made sure that there was no such thing as a crisis. And so this is what I mean by when you stand apart, you are picked apart. And so global power is, or global north power is actually picking apart
Yeah,
very, very weak global south states.
great. Fanta.
So I know my South Sudanese brothers and sisters will completely disagree with what Nee is saying. Look, once again, to operate from this place this harsh, cold world has only left us with nothing but like a loaf of bread. We're not that powerless. We're very powerful people. And the more we keep relinquishing our power to our fellow human beings, we will always find ourselves in these situations. God created each one of us equally. He didn't make you, me, any better than me, or me any better than you. A South Sudanese any better than an American any better than a South Sudanese. Look, people are leaders, right? We can attribute the situations that the African economies, the African countries are in today to bad governance and bad leadership. Now, we, the people, are the ones who continue, right, to vote these
Yeah,
leaders.
yeah.
We forfeit our rights to actually speak up, right, and have the courage to stand up against these bad policies, right? And we subjugate ourselves to that. Therefore, willfully, right, willfully surrendering our very rights, our natural rights, our citizen rights to these terrible leaders who are in it for no other reason but self-enrichment. Time and time again, we continue to elect them. So the responsibility is heavily on us, the people who continue to elect these leaders. Number two, God does not create a creation without giving them sustenance to survive. I gave the example of the bird. Every country, even your household, right, have resources in it that if your life was to go up today, you've been able to at least stock up for like what, a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month. Some people have bunkers in their homes, for God's sake, right? The point is that every country, be it Liberia, be it Eswatini, South Sudan, Rwanda, have the ability to survive based on their own resources. Look, you do not have to trade with the West, right? To say that's their only means of survival for your people. Trade with their African brothers. In fact, when you look at all of Africa's GDP today, it's about like 2 trillion, right? Nominal GDP. When you look at PPP, it's about like 10 point something trillion. That's because we can buy more locally than externally. Externally, we're only worth like 2.8 trillion. Locally,
Yeah.
we're worth 10 plus trillion. That's the difference in re-strategizing, right? Understanding where our power lies and saying, look, I'd rather buy something from my neighbor, say Liberia, buy from Guinea, buy from Sierra Leone, buy from Ghana, buy from Nigeria, than convincing myself that I need that American product or I need that UK product, right? And I don't need it because it doesn't serve me. It continues to make me a slave to myself, a slave, right, to their currency, to their products. The issue is not on the Americans. The issue is not on the Westerners. The issue is on us, the Africans. And look, national security is different from nonsensical immigration policies. What Trump is pushing right now, Trump is Trump. He can do whatever he wants. He is America's a sovereign country. He's the president of America. He's not pushing these policies because they're sensical. He's pushing them for no other reason but to continue to subject African countries to colonial control, right?
African countries who allow it, who will allow it, because he's approached Nigeria. Nigeria said, no, we've got problems of our own. We're not gonna, so yeah, keep going.
South Sudan has gold. South Sudan has oil. You cannot tell me where we all operate automobiles, right? We all operate generators, right? Even if you don't have access to electricity, that you don't need fuel, right? The issue with our leaders is that because they're focused on enriching themselves, they don't think outside of the box. There are strategies that can be employed to expand our economic power, to expand our self-sustenance, to expand our sovereignty. Look, for example, right now it's happening today. We're seeing how Burkina Faso is leveraging, and this is a landlocked country. Let's just not say Burkina Faso because like it's the buzzword, right, of the moment. But it's a landlocked country. It doesn't have access to any ocean front. Yet the development they've been able to do within just a short period, those countries who have access to the Atlantic Ocean, right, have not been able to make even half of such progress. We have to question why is it? Why is it that all along we have been told we need the IMF, we need the World Bank, we need these external fundings to be able to develop our countries, our infrastructure. When all along we only needed to understand what our powers were, say Niger, for example, right? All of their uraniums. Now they're looking at that and saying, no, 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 you're buying this for like 30,000, you're selling it for 10 times more. Let's renegotiate like that deal. So I will close on this. The more we keep pointing our finger, it's pointing right back at us. Right? We are our own problems. Until we understand that and start to put in the measures, the mechanisms to fix that, we're gonna be in the same situation a decade from now, a century from now. And as an African, as a Liberian, I say no. And I encourage all Africans out there to say no, all Black people out there to say no. Reclaim your power and operate from a place of power and not from a place of being subjugated. Right? You have your economic power. You have spending power.
Thank you, Fanta. I need 30 seconds if you want to quickly respond to that.
I think let me actually start on the points where we agree. We agree that the solution lies in African agents, and that is something I agree with you on. I actually mentioned the AU because if we had more time, and I've gone into the AFCFTA, something I've had actually very close working relationship with while I was in Ghana. So the AFCFTA would deliver the things you are talking about, the trade, intra-African trade. It would deliver that. And so I understand that.
But it's been signed for what, 8 years, and what has happened?
Yeah, but Sandra,
not much.
Talk about the AFCFTA.
Yeah, I know. Yes, please. Anyway, I don't mean to digress.
Yeah, and I also agree that some of these decisions have been taken in order to sort of defend certain regimes. Yoweri Museveni in Uganda, for instance, would accept such a deal with the Americans because he's actually looking for regime. He's actually looking to perpetuate his regime. He's actually doing this for himself and his regime. So I agree with you on those two fronts. The solution lies in African
and the same with Rwanda too, right? Because Rwanda is not on good terms right now with Europe.
These regimes are looking to perpetuate themselves. So I agree with you on that. But then the point still remains that this is a reflection of global North, global South relationship. And so Sudan is a very unique case. You're talking about how if God creates people, he leaves them with enough to exist. Sudan was created as a sort of, it was a place of last resort. Really, because of it's a place of last resort because there was a very tense is actually a euphemism, but there was war between the Janjaweed and the people of the South actually forced Western mediators to say, let's create a state for these people of the South to have their own republic. Now, this republic has been created and it's got very little to live with. It's got very, very little to live with. Even if we mention their minerals, even if we mention the very, few resources they have, they've still got very little to feed 11 million people. And it
is important. I must point this out, right? Because South Sudan is being pressured, right? Because the U.S. slapped a visa ban. So there's a backstory here where initially when they sent, someone there, Sudan actually said, no, we're not taking this individual. He's not South Sudanese. And the U.S. said, Marco Rubio said, listen, you better take him or we're slapping a visa ban on you. And they did move forward with that. And then a few weeks later, Sudan is accepting 8 more people. So there's
Yes,
definitely a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. I don't think that South Sudan willingly wanted to receive these individuals, but right now, even as we speak, they're still under U.S. visa ban.
What's your
exactly.
conclusion,
So,
like, is it a survival? Because, like, to your point
Hmm.
that you made, right, me, right, you said in this such hard, cold, treacherous times, we need, furs to survive, right? It's just
We
shivers.
need a blanket.
It's not like you're in the United States. Come
yeah,
on.
but that's what I'm saying. There's a temptation. There's always a temptation to
Yeah.
solve
It's vanity. It's
international
vanity. That's
issues
what it
at.
is. Let's call it what it is. It's vanity.
Yeah, but that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. That there's a temptation to solve international issues or issues that actually show global power. Acting in a certain way. There's always this temptation that, even if you could only be more nationalistic, you will solve it. It
Yeah.
doesn't work
It
that
doesn't
way.
solve.
It
Yeah,
doesn't help. You
I think
actually need friends. You really need
yeah.
people to cover your back.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So I do want to read a couple of comments because this was really, really hot on the channel, the episode. It really sparked a really good conversation. So I just want to go through some of the comments. So Rob MGMS said, as a person of the diaspora, I will never support or visit any country that participates in such acts. To me, it is tantamount to a reverse slave trade, regardless of the character of the individual. As a descendant of former slaves, I am aware that some African tribes were complicit in the trade. Is this for 30 pieces of silver? Ooh.
Yeah.
ah,
It's
I'm always frustrated by that argument. I'm always frustrated
Why? Go ahead, Nee.
because the transatlantic slave trade changed both the quantity and quality of what is meant by slave trade. It changed it. It made it a tricontinental process. A tricontinental. That's why it's a triangle. We actually think of these things as if the African tribesmen who sold their ops into slavery, into the transatlantic slave trade, are equally um, condemnable as the white people or the Europeans who took these people on this voyage of death.
You
They
don't
are
think
not
they're
on the
not?
same. I
Okay.
don't think they're in the same moral bracket.
Why not?
I don't think they're in the same moral bracket. Again, as I said, the transatlantic slave trade changed both the quantity and the quality of what is meant by slavery. It changed it. If one ethnic group conquers another ethnic group, usually what happens is that the conquered becomes a vassal state and it pays tribute to the conqueror, and that was the relationship, right? Often, some people were enslaved in order to sort of work in the conquering tribe's home, territory, and that was what existed. But to take people across seas to plantations, and I mean, chattel slavery was the idea that you existed for the mere purpose of serving a master, and for all your life you were condemned to do that particular thing. Your children also belonged in that sphere. This is not what was happening
You don't.
on the African continent. So when I'm told that they exist in the same moral bracket, the ethnic group that probably sold people to Western traders, are equally as condemnable as Western traders, I get very frustrated. Yeah, I don't think it's the
You don't
same
think it's the
thing.
same? Okay, Fanta, do you want to
No.
respond to that?
Yeah. Look, wrong is wrong, right? I think us Africans are just as culpable. Look, we were engaging in this for monetary reasons, and not for, say, exchange, right? Bartering, trading. Hey, you give me your slave, I give you mine. Or hey, I've conquered like your village, I'm gonna take like your 10 men and add them to my military. Instead, they understood exactly what was happening with these slaves, right? That they were going to sell them to these white men, and they will be shipped across the Atlantic Ocean. Um, Some realized and I think stopped it, and others continue. So, look, we can say that the Westerners, the white men, right, took it to another level. It exacerbated it, right? Completely engaged in acts of uh, um, horrendous behavior, right? Treating them less than animals. We can say that, but we cannot remove the African responsibility. And I think like the
Mm,
sooner we come to that to say, look, yes, we did this. We probably did not understand to what extent, right? The impact that it would have caused, the trauma that would have remained. We can say that, but we have to at some point say, okay, we did this, right?
mm-hmm,
To acknowledge it. We have to come to terms with it. And if it's an apology tour, then let's do that, right? In
mm,
whatever fashion, whatever we need to do to own our part in it,
mm-hmm.
we have to do that. Whatever the white man did, the white man did. But to constantly push it back as if to say we had no role in it, we didn't know that they were being transported across the ocean, I think is disingenuous.
Mm-hmm.
And
Do
once
you,
we solve our problems, like by just denying them, just wishing like they're going away. That's not
yeah.
how it works.
Do you agree with what this user is saying, that the deportation deals are tantamount to that, that the comparison that he's making there? Do you agree, or you think that one is too extreme?
I think one is too extreme
Yeah.
because I mean, you had people in shackles, and look, the people that are being deported, right, or sent to these African countries, some of them are migrants, some of them are hard criminals. So I think like the mixing of the two groups, and
Yeah.
then the given analysis, right, as if to say they're all migrants, it's going to be incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
The exportation of hard criminals to African nations, it is absolutely despicable. It's a nonsensical policy that should be abolished, right? It is not being done out of any shortage of resources on the United States end. I mean, look around, look at Texas, look at Colorado. We have land, right? The United States is not short of land, or is not short of establishing facilities to house these migrants, or build additional prisons as they're good at doing, right, to house these additional criminals, right? They can do that. The very money that they're giving to the African countries, they can use that to establish
Right.
those
Right.
facilities here. Why
Afisa,
do they choose? Why do they choose? Why do they choose these African countries? Why do they choose Africa? Is a form of colonialism, is a form of control, is a form of innocence, a form of slavery, to say, look, we are still your masters, and we're going to demand that you do this. You take our hardcore criminals. You don't have a choice. Otherwise, we pull your aid. And let me tell you
Hmm.
something about
Hmm.
aid. Aid, I was listening to this podcast just a few days ago. I think it's from Middle Nation. And he said, look, it is like a guy coming to rob you, right? Like a robber coming to rob you, and he takes your entire purse, or he takes your wallet. Your wallet has $100 in it. He takes that $100, everything that you have, and then he turns around. He goes, "Do you want $1? Okay, here, you can have $1." It's exactly that. So it's a robbery rebate.
Right. 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 Because they've benefited off of our resources and then given it back to us as
Continue
aid.
to make payments, right? They take $100 and they give us like $1 and say,
Yeah.
here you go. It's not their money. It's our resources, because we don't
Yeah.
process anything. They take our raw materials. They take our human resources, right? Our engineers, our doctors. Look at American hospitals today. Nigerian doctors, African doctors make up the majority of the immigration population.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Mm-hmm.
there, right?
Go ahead, Nee. Really
yeah.
quickly.
So
Yeah.
I mean, having said what Francis said, I'm now wondering why you still do not recognize the need for an internationalist approach to some of these things.
What do you
Why
mean internationalists? Explain that for me.
internationalist approach meaning that you cannot deal with the global north as a nation state, whatever the
Mm-hmm.
nation state means in Africa. An individual nation cannot stand up to global north superpowers. Okay, well, there's just one superpower, but then you cannot stand up to global north pressure and power as a single state. You
Mm-hmm.
can't. You
So
can't.
you're saying there needs to be a unified
there needs to
response and
be an implement,
strategy. Because
yeah,
I get what you're saying. Because South Sudan can't fight on its own. You know,
they
Eswatini
can't,
can't if they're being
they
pressured.
can't,
And
you
this
know,
is
and so
frankly, this is when you ask, what the hell is the African Union up to, right? Because the African Union is supposed to, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but when I think about the idea of the African Union, very much like the European Union, these are the type of policies that they champion. So, I mean,
yeah, so the
that's
African
another
Union,
conversation.
but yeah, just to attend, because the African Union is weak by design.
Yeah.
Is weak because, again, there's always this entrapment of nationalism. People feel you can't tell me what to do. This is my country.
Yeah.
This is my territory. This is my jurisdiction. So they actually they are threatened by the fact that there will be this supervening force, something that goes beyond the nation state that will tell them you are wrong. You should do this. And so, by design, the African Union is weak. It's weak by design.
And I'll ask
because
you, because
they don't want any authority higher than themselves, right? As heads of nations.
You're pushing for this unity, as in that's the only way Africa solves its problem. Yet you have the AU, and your recent critique of the AU is the infighting, right? Is the infighting for superiority. So
not the infighting. No.
Wait. Okay, not infighting, right? But this notion of I'm more superior than you, therefore I should have like they say, right?
Also, no.
Okay, please.
My critique of the AU goes back to nationalism.
Nationalism, yeah.
Yes, the presidents of states feel that there should be no higher power than themselves in charge of things happening within their jurisdiction, right? They wouldn't want the EU. They wouldn't want the EU situation where someone could get a Schengen visa and travel through. You know, they wouldn't want that.
But how is that different from the issue of superiority? Like they're fighting for who is superior, right? Take out
but in this case, they are not fighting among themselves. They are actually very well coordinated on that. They are intentionally coordinating to keep the AU weak, so that the AU doesn't have the sort of powers that something like the EU or even the ASEAN in Asia
how
has.
do we solve Africa problem with the
How
with the
do
AU?
we? That is the central problem here, is where there's just no, what is the solution here?
Presidents are actually presidents and leaders in states that actually think beyond their borders.
Well, I'm really confused.
No, that's it. Presidents and leaders.
I think what Nia is saying is the solution is that unity. That for him, he just doesn't see how we make any progress, how we fight without a unified front. That for me, that's the bottom line.
What?
And you're saying, Fanta, well, that is not happening because look at the AU. How are we going to make that happen when this is how the reality is? This is how these countries think. They think as individual nations. They want to make their own decisions. So where does that leave us?
So there is there is still an opportunity, right, for this unified body, and the AU is doing a terrible job at that right now. I think for the reason that you mentioned, right? Whether we want to call it nationalism, we want to call it a fight for who's more superior, a fight for whose agenda should be prioritized, or like where does someone stands on the prioritization list. Whatever the case is a fight for my voice should be louder than yours, my chest is bigger than yours, I have a more broader shoulder, my economy is larger, whatever. Right? At the end of the day, we ought to understand that, look, negotiating as one body, right, gives us a better access to more mutually beneficial beneficial deals. However, the AU is not currently demonstrating that. So what do you do?
What do we do instead?
Back and wait for the AU. You don't sit back and wait for that moment. You look around, right? Your own house. What can I leverage? What resources do I have to leverage, right? As a negotiation chip, as a bargaining chip. You don't sit back and say, it's a hardcore world. I need that.
So while we wait for the unity, what do we do instead? And
while we wait, South Sudan will take in America's undesirables, because that is the way that individually they can survive. Yeah, that's the way that they can survive
While we wait,
individually.
Burkina Faso
While we
is
wait,
building medical facilities that can absolutely like right go against that
yes,
what we
exactly.
want like in
While we wait,
waiting. So they're not waiting. And that's the difference, right? That's
While
people
we
are not
wait.
waiting.
that's the pivot. That's the pivot. Until all of our leaders can arrive at a sensible agreement, we don't sit back and pluck our nails, right? We don't sit back and file our nails. We look at our own resources that we have. We use those as leveraging power to move our economies and our development forward, as Burkina Faso is doing, as Mali is doing, as Niger is doing, right? As so many others are doing. So we don't wait.
Yeah. So,
Anyway, sure.
to keep going, a couple more comments that I want to read. So from Good News Jamaica TV, he said, well. In Jamaica, we say, turn back blow. When you're digging a grave for yourself, dig two, one for them and one for you. If any of these leaders believe that the U.S.'s bargaining chip is really going to be worth anything by the end of this year, well, they deserve everything that is coming their way. The only problem is the only people who will feel the fallout are the normal citizens of those countries. The leadership, quote unquote, will never feel them. Ooh. And I think that's what we're talking about here, right? The leaders is everyone, the leadership. That's where it starts. These leaders. One more comment and then we'll move on. It's not from Kelugu 3776. It's no surprise that these deals are happening in countries where the people can't or won't take the government to task. This is very disappointing and a worrying development for the continent. The only way to end this is for neighboring countries to ostracize those who act contrary to the greater good. But this is Africa, continent of no accountability. So that's not going to happen.
Wow, West.
We actually have a very strong history. We have a very strong history of taking each other to task.
But I think this user makes a good point, Nee, about us. What action? Because if Nigeria is seeing the challenge with this and saying, no, this is not good for our continent, right? If Ghana is saying this is not good for our continent, but then you have 4 countries who are saying yes. Can these countries who don't see any good in these deals, can they do something to hold the other 4 countries, accountable in this case? Because what happens, on the continent affects everyone. This is not just going to affect South Sudan and Rwanda and these countries. It affects the whole continent. So to the point, can the other countries do anything about this?
Yeah, I'm sure in diplomatic terms, or in diplomatic circles, you would find envoys or officials actually telling these hosting countries or these receiving countries that what they think. I can bet that the Nigerian officials will be telling South Sudanese what they think of what is happening, or Rwandans will be the South Africans will be telling Rwandans what they think of.
You think
of
so?
What is happening. I do think
you
so.
think Ramaphosa gave Kagame a call like, yo, what are you doing, man? Chill.
Ramaphosa is not exactly friends with Kagame these days, but I do think seriously that among the the spectrum of diplomatic or the diplomatic core in Africa, you would be having people conversing on informal levels about this, and they would be telling these receiving countries what is wrong, what is exactly wrong. As to whether they can be ostracized or they should be ostracized is another thing altogether. There's in diplomacy we have a beer hug diplomacy where you actually keep someone closer because you want them to do a certain thing, you want them to act in a certain way. To ostracize them is to push them into the hands of the people you don't want them to go to. So imagine ostracizing South Sudan. Where do you think they're going to go to? They are going to receive even more migrants like that. So it's a tricky thing. It's a tricky thing. I can understand why you'd insist that they should be ostracized. I can understand why you insist that they should be
I'm not insisting. I was just reading the user's comment.
I'm talking about the commenter. I'm talking about the commenter. I can understand the sentiment, but to create a sort of punitive regime around their receiving of people from the United States in this manner would only serve the interest of
Yeah.
powers beyond Africa, and that's a tight rope that states need to
Mm-hmm.
walk. And I guess that's the point of diplomacy. That's why they get the big bucks to think about
Okay.
these things.
Thank you. Fanta, your quick reaction to that?
Look, I think there needs to be a balanced solution, right? With everything, we cannot be in the extreme in formulating a solution. But we also exercise a bit of tough love with these countries, right? Because it comes down to national security. If you're taking in hardcore criminals and I share a border with you, the risk of my citizens on the border being exposed to your hardcore criminal and their criminality, right, because of a decision, a bad decision that you made as a leader, I have the responsibility to protect my citizens and protect the welfare of my country. So therefore, I'm going to say, look, my brother, I love you, but I'm gonna have to put these sanctions on you. You can't come over anymore. Now I'm gonna have to close my borders at like 2 o'clock, right? Or I'm gonna have to institute additional security policies at my border, like to ensure that not just I don't maintain this open door policy as I had with you before. So I think, look, every country has the right to make decisions as they see fit for their people, whether those decisions are selfish and only benefits those leaders at the top. And often that's the case. It's up to them, right? Their people needs to stand up and let their voices be heard.
Yeah.
That they disapprove, right, of those decisions. You cannot fault another country, say for a country that's on the border, to say, look, we're not going to let you guys in until your leader, right, reverses this decision because it causes national security for us. Therefore, he made his decision, or you guys made your decision. We're going to make ours. We're still brothers and sisters, right? Look, brothers and sisters fight. We also need to have boundaries, right? It's really important. That's this sense of deterrence that we need to have.
Well, I unfortunately we're out of time. I had so many more topics I wanted us to delve into, but I think that this topic was very important and demanded, our attention. So I wanted us to spend time on it, and I appreciate the passionate discussion that and perspectives that you've all brought to the table. And I just want to leave us all with this, right? Because President Trump, this is it's 9 months, 8 months. Has it even been 8 months since January? 7, 8 months, right?
8 months.
And I think the question that we have to ask ourselves, for me, my biggest concern is what's next? What is next? And what I mean by that is today's deportation deals. These countries are being forced to, in many ways, right, being pressured into these deals. What is next? What else is going to be pushed, shoved down their throats that they will have no option but to do for Trump, for this administration? And I think that is something worrying because he has 3.5 more years to go, right? So I think that this is a critical time for the continent to speak up and to and to let it be known that no, this is not how it's going to work. It's setting a precedent that I'm not sure that we can afford, right? And I hear all the points that I hear your point, Nee. I think that the power dynamics in this situation can be overlooked, right? But I also hear what Fanta is saying, that this is the time that we really need to look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves as Africans, what do we really want? Because we have everything that we need on our continent, but somehow, we're not able to leverage them. And I think that is the critical question that we need to be asking ourselves today. So, the conversation continues. It doesn't end here. I want to thank you both for coming on and for this, what I thought was a very powerful conversation. I look forward to having you back next week as we delve into more of the topics. Hopefully nothing crazy next week. I feel like every week we wake up and there's something new. But hopefully nothing crazy. But thank you both again, and wishing you a great weekend, and we'll connect next week.
Thank you.
All right.